I was standing in the frozen food aisle at Kroger when I saw her. My daughter, my Nora. She was crouched down near the bottom shelf, putting back a bag of shredded cheese she'd already put in her cart. I watched her do it. She looked at the price, then looked at what was left in her hand. A few crumpled bills, and she put the cheese back. I stood there holding a bag of green beans and I couldn't move. Nora is 34 years old. She has a master's degree in education. She taught third grade for 6 years before she took time off when the baby came. My granddaughter Lily. She is 4 years old and she has her grandfather's eyes and she laughs at everything. I have not seen either of them in 11 weeks. I know that because I counted. Nora? She spun around so fast she knocked her cart sideways. Her face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, then something that looked like relief, then something I can only describe as pure terror. Mom. Her voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? I live 12 minutes away, I said. What do you mean, what am I doing here? She looked thin. Not diet thin. The other kind. The kind that comes from skipping meals. Her coat, the nice gray wool one she got 2 Christmases ago, had a tear along the collar that had been safety pinned shut. Her shoes were wrong for the weather. We were in late November in Columbus, Ohio, and my daughter was wearing canvas sneakers with no lining. I looked at her cart, a small bag of rice, 1 can of black beans, a carton of eggs, store-brand bread. That was it. I said, "Where's your car, sweetheart?" She blinked. What? Your car, the Subaru. Did you park on the other side? Something moved across her face. She looked down at the cart handle and gripped it with both hands. It's at home, she said. I took the bus. The bus, from their neighborhood, that was 40 minutes each way in the cold. Nora, I kept my voice steady. I've been a registered nurse for 38 years. I know how to keep my voice steady when everything inside me is screaming. Look at me. She looked up, and I saw it. The thing I hadn't seen on our video calls because she always made sure the lighting was soft and she always sat far enough back and she always had Lily on her lap to give her something else to talk about. Her left cheekbone, a shadow, faded enough that it was almost gone but not quite. Come with me, I said. Mom, I can't. I have to get back before. Nora Elizabeth. I took the cart handle out of her hands, left it right there in the aisle, and took her by the arm. Come with me right now. We sat in my car in the Kroger parking lot for 2 hours, the engine running so we'd stay warm, and my daughter, who had always been the one in the family who never cried, not at movies, not at funerals, not even when she broke her wrist in 7th grade, sat in the passenger seat and told me everything. It had started before Lily was born. She'd met Marcus at a work conference 3 years before that. He was charming the way a person can be charming when they've practiced it their whole life. Confident, attentive. He called when he said he'd call. He remembered things she'd mentioned in passing. He made her feel, she told me, like she was the most important person in whatever room they were in. They dated for 8 months. He proposed on her birthday. I had concerns. I won't pretend I didn't. But Nora was 30 and she was happy, and who was I to say anything? Her father had passed 3 years earlier, and I think some part of her was just so hungry for a family again. For someone who chose her. They got married at the Botanical Garden on a Saturday in June. It was beautiful. I danced with her at the reception and I told her I loved her and I meant it so completely that it hurt. The changes were slow. That's what she kept saying. They were so slow. First, it was her job. Marcus made enough. He was a project manager at a commercial construction firm, and he thought it made more sense for Nora to stay home once they got pregnant. She agreed. She'd always wanted to be present for the early years. Nothing about that seemed wrong. Then it was the joint account. Everything in one place, he said. Simpler. She put her savings in. Her inheritance from her father. $42,000 went in too to help with the down payment on the house. Then it was the passwords. He set up all the online banking, managed all the bills. She didn't have login information for any of it. He said he was just keeping things organized. She said she never really thought about it much because the bills got paid and there was food in the house and Lily was healthy. Then Lily turned 2 and Nora started talking about going back to work. Just part-time, just to have something. Marcus said they didn't need it. She said she wanted it. He said she was being selfish, that Lily needed her mother home, that Nora had always been a little too focused on herself. She let it go. 6 months later, she brought it up again. She'd found a position at an elementary school 10 minutes from the house, 3 days a week. That night, after dinner, Marcus threw a glass of water across the kitchen. He didn't throw it at her, he threw it at the wall. He apologized immediately after and said he was under a lot of stress at work and it would never happen again. It happened 2 more times over the next year, once a plate, once a picture frame. He never touched her, not for a long time. I pressed my hand flat against my leg while she was telling me this because I needed something to hold on to and I didn't want her to see me shaking. Around the time Lily turned 3, Marcus's mother, Renata, started coming around more. She divorced Marcus's father years ago and lived about 40 minutes north in Westerville. She began showing up on weekdays. Sometimes she'd be at the house when Nora came back from taking Lily to the park, just sitting at the kitchen table, having coffee. Nora said she tried to be welcoming. She really did. But Renata started making comments, small ones, about how Nora kept the house, about how Lily's hair looked, about how Marcus worked so hard and surely Nora could manage a little more around the house given that she was home all day. Then Marcus started repeating those comments, not as his own opinions, just as observations. My mother mentioned the laundry's been piling up. Renata said Lily seemed tired when she was here. You've been letting her nap too long. Nora said she started keeping a cleaner house, started waking Lily up from naps earlier, started going to bed at night with a list in her head of everything she might have done wrong that day. The cheek happened 4 months ago. She told me this part quietly. Lily had been cranky all afternoon, and dinner wasn't ready when Marcus got home, and he said something sharp and Nora said something back. Just one sentence, she said. She just said, "Then you make it." And he grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her into the doorframe. She said it wasn't hard. She said it like that mattered. Like degree was a defense. After he cried. He said he didn't know what had come over him. He said he'd never do it again. He said if she told anyone it would destroy their family and what would happen to Lily if they split up, because his mother was a paralegal. Did Nora know that? His mother had connections. He'd fight for full custody and he'd win, because Nora hadn't worked in 4 years and she had no income and no independent credit history. And what judge was going to give a stay-at-home mother sole custody over a man who made good money and had family in the legal field? She believed him, or she was too scared not to. She stopped calling me as much, I noticed. But I thought she was just busy. I thought we'd hit one of those periods that mothers and adult daughters sometimes hit where the distance grows a little before it closes again. I had no idea. I sat in that parking lot and I thought about all the Sunday afternoons I'd called and gotten her voicemail, all the times I'd texted and gotten back a smiley face and busy week, talk soon. I thought about Thanksgiving, which was 3 weeks away, and how she'd already told me they were going to Renata's this year. I thought about Lily in that house. I said, "Does he know where you are right now?" "He's at work until 6. "And Lily?" "She's with Renata." A pause. "She's always with Renata now." I asked Nora if she wanted to leave. Just like that. Directly. I wasn't going to dance around it. She started crying again. She said she didn't know how. She said she had no money. Marcus gave her a household allowance in cash, $120 a week, and she had to account for every dollar. She said she had no credit cards in her own name. She said she was afraid of what he'd do if she tried to take Lily and he found out before she got clear. I told her to listen to me very carefully. I told her that I had been working for 38 years and I had a savings account he didn't know existed, and she was never going to count coins in a grocery store again as long as I was breathing. I told her that she was not going to that house tonight. I told her that Lily was going to be fine and that we were going to get her together, and that nobody with a paralegal for a mother had ever scared me in my life. She almost laughed at that. Almost. I drove her to my house and I started making calls. The first call was to my neighbor Beverly, who had retired 2 years ago from 30 years as a family law attorney in Franklin County. I didn't ask Beverly for professional advice. I asked her to have coffee with me the next morning and told her it was important. Beverly didn't charge me a thing. She sat at my kitchen table the next morning with Nora and she listened, and then she made a phone call of her own to a colleague named Patricia who took domestic cases on a sliding scale fee and had a reputation, according to Beverly, for being the kind of attorney that other attorneys didn't like to face in court. Patricia took Nora's case. The second call I made was to my bank, to add Nora as an authorized user on one of my accounts so she'd have access to emergency funds. The third call was to my son-in-law's workplace. I want to be clear about something. I didn't call to cause trouble. I called because I needed to understand something. I told the receptionist I was trying to confirm employment for a credit application and asked simply whether Marcus was on the schedule that week. She told me he was out of town at a site in Cincinnati through Friday. Out of town. He had not told Nora he was going to be out of town. He had left her with $120 for the week, a 4-year-old child being watched by his mother, and a bus pass. I called Renata's house that afternoon. I kept my voice pleasant. I told her I was in the area and wanted to come get Lily for a visit. Renata hesitated. She asked if Marcus knew. I told her that Marcus and I had spoken just the other day, which was technically true. I'd called him while he was driving and he'd said he'd call me back and never did. And she said fine, bring her back by 7. I picked up Lily from Renata's house at 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon. My granddaughter ran to me across Renata's living room with her arms wide open, and she smelled like baby shampoo, and she had a small bruise on her shin from where she'd tripped on the porch steps. Renata said, "Just an accident." I looked at that bruise for a moment and I told myself it was from the steps, and I still believe that. But I looked at it. I drove Lily to my house, where her mother was waiting, and I will tell you honestly that the two of them together on my couch with a blanket and a bowl of popcorn watching a movie about talking animals was the best thing I had seen in a very long time. While they watched the movie, I went to my bedroom and I called Patricia. Over the next 9 days, I documented everything I could. Patricia told me what was useful and what wasn't. Bank records showing Nora's name on a joint account but no access to log in. Photographs I took of the house when I drove by one evening, the car Nora had been using, a 2019 Honda Pilot that was in both their names, parked in front while Nora had been riding the bus for months. I wrote down everything Nora had told me, dated and detailed, and Patricia had Nora sign a formal statement. Beverly connected us with a domestic violence advocate at a local organization called Directions for Youth and Families who helped us document the physical incident with Nora's formal account. Marcus came home from Cincinnati on Friday and found the house empty. He called Nora's cell phone 14 times that night. I know because I was sitting next to her when it rang and I watched her count them. He called me once. I answered. He was very calm. He said there had been a misunderstanding and asked me to send Nora home. I said, "She is home." He said his mother had legal contacts. I said, so do I. He hung up. Patricia filed for an emergency protective order that Monday. Given the documented physical incident, the financial control, and the isolation pattern, the judge granted it by Wednesday morning. Marcus was required to stay away from Nora, from my address, and from Lily's preschool. 2 weeks later, in a conference room with both attorneys present, we sat across the table from Marcus and a lawyer he'd hired, not Renata's contact, someone he'd found himself. A man in a suit who looked like he'd rather be somewhere else. Nora had been quiet the whole drive over. I'd held her hand in the parking lot and told her that whatever happened in that room, she had already done the hardest thing. She'd already walked out. Everything else was paperwork. Patricia was extraordinary. She laid out the financial picture first. The $42,000 from Nora's inheritance that had gone into the joint account and been spent down entirely over 4 years, with documentation showing it had been used for home improvements and Marcus's truck payments and a golf membership that Nora had never used. She laid out the cash allowance arrangement, the lack of credit access, the employment prevention. Then she laid out the protective order, then Nora's formal statement about the assault. Marcus's attorney asked for a break after the first 40 minutes. They came back with an offer. Marcus would not contest the divorce. He would agree to primary physical custody with Nora, with scheduled visitation. He would sign a document acknowledging Nora's contribution to the marital estate and agree to a cash settlement of $31,000, not the full 42, but Patricia said fighting for the rest would cost more in time than it was worth. The Honda Pilot would transfer to Nora's name. He would pay child support according to Ohio's standard calculation. There was one more thing Patricia had asked for that I hadn't told Nora about in advance because I didn't want to get her hopes up. A requirement that Marcus complete a 52-week certified domestic violence intervention program as part of the divorce agreement, not criminal court but on record. Patricia said it would matter if he ever tried to revisit custody. His attorney conferred with him for 12 minutes. Then they agreed. Nora didn't cry in that conference room. She signed her name on 4 documents and she sat very straight in her chair and she said thank you to Patricia and she picked up her bag and we walked out. She cried in the elevator, just for about 30 seconds, and then she stopped and she looked at me and she said, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." I said, "You told me when you could." She moved in with me while the settlement processed. Lily started sleeping in the room that used to be Nora's when she was a teenager, the one with the glow-in-the-dark stars still on the ceiling that I never had the heart to take down. Nora reached out to the school district in January. They had a long-term substitute position starting after winter break. She took it. She was nervous the first morning. She stood in my kitchen at 6:45 a.m. in her good coat, the new one I bought her for Christmas, and she looked a little like she did on her first day of student teaching 12 years ago. I told her she looked like a teacher. She rolled her eyes the same way she did at 17 and she kissed Lily goodbye and she went. She called me on her lunch break. She didn't say much, just that it was good, that she'd forgotten how much she liked the job, that one of her students had brought in a drawing of their family and explained every member for 4 minutes straight, and it was the best presentation she'd ever seen. I'm 63 years old. I have buried a husband, survived a cancer scare, raised 2 children, and worked the night shift in an ICU for more years than I want to count. I know what it looks like when someone finds their footing again. That was 4 months ago. Nora has her own apartment now, small, 2nd floor, with a little balcony where she put a bird feeder that Lily is obsessed with. The settlement money is sitting in an account in Nora's name only. She's applying for full-time positions for next fall. She calls me most evenings, usually around 8 after Lily is in bed. Sometimes we talk for an hour. Sometimes we just stay on the phone together while she folds laundry, and I watch the news and neither of us says much at all. Last Sunday, I took Lily to the Kroger on Henderson Road. She walked alongside me through the aisles and pointed at everything she wanted, and I said yes to a reasonable amount of it and no to the rest, and she accepted this like a person with opinions who understands the word budget. When we got to the checkout, she watched me unload the cart very carefully, and then she asked the cashier, a young woman with a nose ring and very good posture, if she could help by pushing the cart. The cashier said sure. Lily pushed that cart with the seriousness of someone completing an important task. Her tongue poked out a little on one side, the way her grandfather's used to when he was concentrating. I stood there watching her, and I thought about a Tuesday afternoon in November when I almost walked past the frozen food aisle. I've thought about that a lot, how close I came to not turning down that aisle, how I might have gone straight to the checkout and driven home and called Nora's cell and gotten her voicemail and left a message saying call me back, and she would have texted a smiley face and another 11 weeks would have passed. I don't let myself stay in that version of events very long. What I know is this: she's safe. My daughter is safe. My granddaughter pushes grocery carts with the full gravity of someone who has never had a reason to fear a grocery store, and I intend to keep it that way. I don't need anything else. I keep thinking about the cheese. A $4 bag of shredded cheese that my daughter put back on the shelf because she was counting what she had left and it wasn't enough. That's the image I come back to when I want to understand how something like this happens. Not the big moments. Not the night he shoved her into the doorframe. Not the 14 phone calls in a row. The cheese. The quiet, invisible kind of erosion that happens so slowly a person doesn't notice until they're standing in a grocery store in November with canvas sneakers and a safety-pinned coat, deciding between rice and dairy. Not be chooses to end up there. That's what I want people to understand. Nora is one of the smartest people I know. She reads everything. She thinks carefully. She loved her students with the kind of patience that most people can't sustain for a week, let alone 6 years. She is not naive. She is not weak. She was a person who trusted someone she had good reasons to trust, and that person spent years making small adjustments to her access, to her confidence, to her understanding of what was normal, until the woman standing in that frozen food aisle barely resembled the one who had walked down the aisle at the botanical garden. What undoes that kind of damage isn't one dramatic moment. It's a series of decisions made by someone who refuses to look away. I could have walked past that aisle. I could have decided it wasn't my place. I could have told myself she was an adult and she'd reach out when she was ready. I've heard people say that. I understand the impulse, but I watched my daughter put back a bag of cheese, and something in me that was older and quieter than reason said, no, not today. What I did after that wasn't brave. It was just clear thinking applied to a problem I cared about more than anything else in the world. I called the people I knew. I asked the right questions. I wrote things down. I didn't panic, and I didn't make threats I couldn't back up. I'd spent nearly 4 decades in rooms where panic was a luxury nobody could afford, and I used every bit of that in the weeks that followed. Clarity, when someone you love is in danger, is the most useful thing you can bring to the table. But here is the part that stays with me most. Nora had to decide to tell me. She was sitting in that cold car in the Kroger parking lot, and she could have said, "I'm fine, Mom. It's been a rough month. I'll call you later." She almost did. I could see her almost doing it, and she didn't. After 4 months of silence and fear and 100 small reasons not to, she told me the truth. That took something I don't have a simple word for. It was more than courage in the dramatic sense. It was the decision to believe, against everything that had been done to wear that belief down, that she deserved help, that she was worth the risk of asking, that the person sitting next to her would not make things worse. She was right. And she knew she was right because she knew me. Not because I'm exceptional, but because I had spent 34 years being someone she could count on in ordinary ways, so that when the extraordinary moment came, she already knew the answer. I think about what we owe each other in families. Not the holidays and the milestone photos. The Tuesday afternoons. The returned calls. The noticing. The willingness to turn down the right aisle. Lily has glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling now, the same ones that watched over her mother 30 years ago. Some things that look small are the most important things of all.